Dear colleagues and dear friends, it is a great pleasure and a privilege to be here with you today. The title of my presentation is The Therapeutic and Healing Nature of Art and Creativity. I would like to begin not with a definition, but with a question. Have you ever experienced a moment when music, an image, a poem, movement, or simple creative act touched something in you that words could not reach? Perhaps while creating, you felt even briefly more alive, more present, more yourself. What happened in that moment? Was it simply aesthetic pleasure, or was something deeper taking place? I believe that art has always been much more than that, and art is one, according to my opinion, of the ways in which human beings make a contact with themselves, with one another, and with the world. I can add that art as a psychotherapy brings us to authentic way of living. It is possibility, but we can try to do it. Long before psychological theories or psychotherapeutic methods exist, people painted, created rituals, told stories, and did many things. Creativity is not something added to life. Creativity is woven into life itself. Throughout history, art has accompanied celebration and mourning, transition and suffering, love and loss, transformation and renewal. When ordinary language is no longer sufficient, we reach for another language, the language of images, music, movement, metaphor, and imagination. This brings us to the central question of my presentation. What is it about art and creativity that make them therapeutic and even healing? I would like to explore this question from a broad integrative perspective, bringing together psychology, neuroscience, embodiment, creativity, relationship, and meaning. Because healing does not always begin with an explanation. Sometimes it begins with an image, a sound, a movement, the courage to create something new, or simply with being seen. This is where I invite you to join me today, not only as a professionals who work with art and psychotherapy for many decades, but also as a human being who have been touched by creative experience. Perhaps the most important question for me is not can art heal, but rather creative experience. Let us begin there. What happens to us when we create? When we draw, paint, write, sing, dance, play music, shape, clay, move our bodies, or simply allow ourselves to imagine, something changes. We shift from being observers of our experience to becoming participants in it. We give form of something that may previously have existed only as a feeling, sensation, impulse, or inner image. So creativity gives form to the invisible. An emotion can become a color, a memory can become an image, pain become a story, fear can become movement, and silence can become music. Something that was difficult to express can become visible, tangible, and shareable, and therefore potentially transformable. This is particularly important in psychotherapy because many deep experiences are not organized primarily in words. They may be held in the body, in sensations, images, implicit memories, and relational patterns. Sometimes we know something before we can explain it. Sometimes the body speaks when words remain silent. Art offers a third space between inner experience and the outer world. A painting is not the emotion itself, a movement is not the trauma itself, and a poem is not a memory itself. Yet through the creative process, we can enter into relationship with these experiences. We can look at them, move around them, and give them another form. Gradually, we may discover that we are not only what happened to us, we can also become the creators of what happens next. This is one of the deepest connections between creativity and healing. Healing doesn't necessarily mean erasing suffering. It may mean transforming our relationship to it. So, when we speak about the therapeutic potential of art, we are not describing a magical cure. We are describing a human process in which creation, emotion, body, relationship, meaning, and the brain come together. Creating can change us. But how does this change happen? What takes place in the brain and body during a creative process? And why can creativity sometimes help us regulate emotions, process difficult experiences, and reconnect with ourselves and others? To explore these questions, we need to understand creativity not only as artistic activity, but as an experience involving attention, emotion, memory, imagination, movement, and relationship. When we create, we engage a dynamic network of processes. We focus attention, make choices, remember, imagine, sense, evaluate, and respond. At the same time, we may become more aware of our bodies and subtle changes in our emotional state. This is why creative activity can feel calming, absorbing, or meditative. Our attention becomes unshored in the present. The line on the page, the rhythm of the music, the movement of the body, or the texture of a material gives us something concrete to follow. Difficult emotions don't necessarily disappear. Rather, they may become more manageable because they are no longer experienced as completely overwhelming or formless. They begin to have boundaries and can be observed, expressed, and explored. This can be especially relevant after stress or trauma, then the nervous system may remain in a state of alertness, tension, withdrawal, or disconnections. A person may understand respond as if danger were present. Through rhythm, repetition, breathing, movement, color, sound, or tactile experience, creative practices can offer gradual contact with the body and the present. They allow experience to emerge at a tolerable pace without requiring a person to speak before they are ready. At this point, it is important to introduce integrative art psychotherapy. Integrative art psychotherapy is original psychotherapeutic modality, humanistic by its essence, and the phenomenological method is the main we use in doing psychotherapy. It is a creative use of artistic media from by client as a therapeutic means of non-verbal and symbolic communication, as well as verbal in the presence of therapists in a safe setting. It is mainly consists of expressing and the main thoughts and feelings from unconscious mind, just expressed in images more and before the words. So it is a multimodal approach, which means not only that it makes extensive use of materials and techniques from the other psychotherapeutic modalities, but also that it employs different channels and forms of communication, especially non-verbal ones, through the broad use of various artistic media, such as drawing, painting, collage, comics, modeling, movement, sound, music, drama, bibliotherapy, phototherapy, play therapy, the art, genogram, film, video, and combined techniques. At the center and as the primary focus of therapeutic work is the image and its transformation from the unconscious into conscious, with particular emphasis on its embodiment, which is based predominantly on the body-oriented therapeutic and psychodrama work. The main goal of most psychotherapeutic modalities, with exception of those that place their primary emphasis on behavior and behavioral change, is attainment of insight, the expansion of our awareness both outwardly and inwardly. This is also what constitutes our overall psychological and spiritual development. In short, we may state that this goal consists in living more consciously shaping, creating our own lives, allowing our life to become our own work of art rather than a pale copy of the lives of our relatives and ancestors from the past, in becoming creators rather than creatures. We can say that the basic level of integrative art psychotherapy is in metaphorical terms and can be described as clearing the garden of the weeds of the past. This is psychological level of therapeutic work, becoming aware of the wounds, patterns, defenses, and unresolved experiences that may continue to shape our present life. The next, more advanced level of therapeutic work in integrative art psychotherapy is spiritual level. It can be described in the following way. Once the garden has been cleared, we can begin to plant new seeds. These are the seeds of new possibilities, new meanings, new ways of relating, new choices, new forms of love, creativity and connections. Because healing is not only about removing what no longer serves us, it is also about creating space for something new to grow. We clear the garden of the past and then we ask ourselves, what do I want to plant here now? I shall first present one of the techniques, very popular today, technique of creative visualization, which is one of the principal techniques used in our therapeutic work. And then I shall also say a few words about the spiritual mindfulness meditation technique, the technique of full focused awareness. We too are using it more and more frequently in our work. It is important to note that therapeutic work with image constitutes the first and fundamental part of the work in integrative art psychotherapy, because clients most often come with problems that require a longer period of work in order to achieve the therapeutic goal. The second part of the work is oriented toward the development of spiritual vision, mind sight, uh, through the practice of full focused awareness, mindfulness meditation. That is toward work within the spiritual domain. Now I begin with working with the image. How does it look like? Working with the image is a specific form of therapeutic work within integrative art psychotherapy, involving the use of a technique of creative visualization. In integrative art psychotherapy, but also in everyday life, the ability to create mental images or creative visualization is one of the most important human capacities, and at the same time one of the techniques used in our therapeutic work. Everything that happens to us in life, as the latest findings in neuroscience also confirm, represents the realization of our own mental images, unconscious and conscious, whether positive or negative. Sigmund Freud stated that our dreams are the royal road to unconscious, and we know that our dreams are expressed predominantly through images. We should also mention Jung and his archetypal images. As early as the beginning of the 20th century, Jung defined the significance of imagination and visual representations in the process of self-knowledge and personal development. His method of active imagination laid the foundations for what we today call visualization. Projected tests used by psychologists in clinical practice are also frequently based on images. For example, TAT, thematic apperception test, the Rorschach test, the human figure drawing, the family drawing, tree drawing, or house drawing, and so forth. Within the process of integrative art psychotherapy, we predominantly use a phenomenological method, as I said, in approaching the analysis of the image, while at the same time employing the technique of creative visualization. Through the use of our imagination, we bring forth what lies within us, what is invisible, unspoken, unknown, and unacknowledged. That is what is unconscious. This unconscious material may be individual, familial, or transgenerational, or collective. This takes place within the process of becoming conscious, as Freud proclaimed in his well-known formulation, where id was, there ego shall be. A considerable number of us live unconsciously, governed by unconscious mechanisms, schemas, and patterns. The aim is to become conscious and to begin living in accordance with ourselves, with our authentic wishes, goals, and intentions. It is therefore possible to live consciously, freely, and creatively. Visualization and motivation. Visualization also influences motivation. Our roots are in the future. As long as we concern ourselves only with the past, we remain trapped in it. We need to step into the future and project goals that inspire us to move forward, then we clearly visualize our goal, whether it concerns health, career, success, or a more harmonious life. It is easier to maintain continuity and perseverance when facing obstacles. In this way, visualization functions as an inner compass. It helps us overcome bad habits, develop new forms of behavior, and strengthen emotional stability. This is why it is increasingly used not only in psychotherapy but also in personal developmental programs. In short, creative consciousness enables our transformation, which in turn influences our personality and its transformation. Its effect lies in connecting the conscious and the subconscious, while the conscious part sets the goal. Through the repetition of visual images, the subconscious internalizes it and begins to shape behavior toward its realization. Experiments have shown that our brain does not make a major distinction between a real and imagined experience. Neural networks are activated in almost the same way. This means that imagining success may directly contribute to its achievement. The goal, therefore, is to live consciously, to create what we want in life, and by doing so, to participate actively in creating our own future. The image and its transformation through the unconscious to a conscious are at the center of therapeutic work aimed at change in the client within integrative art psychotherapy. The image has multiple functions. First is diagnostic. It reveals where the client is at the present moment, some kind of present diagnosis. Second, prognostic. It indicates the direction of therapeutic work, how far we have progressed and what has been achieved in therapy. Third, contractual. It is used for setting a positive therapeutic goal. Fourth, communicational. It serves to establish and maintain contact. Fifth, psychotherapeutic. It becomes a means of deconstructing the old image and reconstructing a new image of oneself, others, and the world. The client works toward making a new conscious decision. Making a new decision is crucial. Six, evaluative. It shows what the client has accomplished in psychotherapy, that is, whether the established therapeutic goal has been achieved. The client is ready to make a new conscious decision only after achieving profound insights, not one but many, which involve the integration of cognition, emotion, and behavior. This means that it is necessary to release not only mental blocks, which means defense mechanisms, but also bodily blocks, such as muscular spasm, that block trapped emotions and form the body armor. Consequently, body-oriented work is both necessary and very important within our integrative approach. We cannot imagine to work psychotherapy without body work. Phases of working with the image. It's crucial to see how we start from the image and how we are doing psychotherapy, integrative art psychotherapy. I shall describe the phases of working within the image that illustrate the therapeutic process within the integrative art psychotherapy approach. First, imagining and using creative visualization. we invite the client to allow images to appear on their inner mental screen before the inner eye. For example, the instruction may be, look within yourself and tell what you see, or express with color and form what you see on your mental ecran. Or show how you feel. It is a simple instruction. Or more simply, we may invite the client to allow the hand to guide them and express what it wants to express. This can also be done separately with the left hand and the right hand, resulting in two drawings. The client is first offered a sheet of paper and various types of drawing materials. The client may also choose how they wish to express themselves. Second phase, externalization and embodiment of the image. The next step is to transfer the image into visible artistic form through drawing, painting, etc. In the course of the work, we discuss what has been represented in the image. For example, let us consider a flower growing on a rubbish heap, in a place where no one passes by, no one notices it, and no one even looks at it. How does that flower feel? We then ask the client to become that flower and to position themselves physically in the room as that flower in the imagined place represented in the picture, the rubbish heap. Often the client selects a particular corner of the room as the imagined place corresponding to where they currently feel themselves to be in the life. The client's body posture is important. The therapist joins the client in the place they have chosen and begins a therapeutic dialogue. For example, if a client is curled up with the head lowered, with depressed facial expression, and appearance, the therapist asks how they feel as a flower represented in the image, this time embodied within the physical space of the room. A frequent response is sad and lonely, useless and unnecessary, as though nobody see me. Third phase, discovering the meaning of the image together with the therapist. Co-creation of meaning. This is a joint undertaking. The meaning of the image is reached together with the therapist. In the example above, the client discovered that they were the flower on the rubbish heap, and that they felt sad, lonely, useless, unnecessary, as though nobody sees me. The therapist's role is the construction of a meaning of the image it involves empathy. Therapists may also bring themselves into the same position of a flower, joining the client and demonstrating that they understand them, while at the same time gaining a deeper understanding of the client's experience. Fourth phase, working on changing the image from the original to a desired image. From the first one, expose how client is feel in that moment, to the next one, correct it and how he can be to be in a best possible position, situation, whatever and however he imagined that he like and wish and wants to be. The desired image represents in fact the therapeutic goal, often expressed metaphorically. For example, from a flower on the rubbish heap to a flower in a garden in the company of other flowers, or to a flower in a sunny clearing. Where are people, there it is seen, and where it is no longer lonely and sad, or however the client wishes and wants this new desired image to look. We could call this an image in action. The answer is simple. The therapist invites the client to imagine a more pleasant place for the flower, for himself or herself, and to describe it. This is followed by the creation of the desired image, or image in action. If the client has chosen to be a flower in the garden with our flowers, the therapist asks the client through drama work to choose the other flowers that they would like to have there and with whom they would like to be together in a garden. The client chooses some of the group members present in the case of group psychotherapy and creates the kind of garden in which they would like to be, designing it and situating it in a more pleasant place instead of the rubbish heap. There is also a spatial shift from being the sad, lonely flower in the corner of the room on the rubbish heap. The client chooses a more pleasant location in the room, for example, by a window illuminated by sunlight. Most often this entire creative process unfolds easily, and once the client has entered the desired image that they themselves have created, they have already taken their first and decisive step toward change. The client has experienced that being in the corner, curled up, lonely, sad, is no longer acceptable. Then a situation of choice is offered. They also experience that they are the one who decides. This time, consciously, they make a choice concerning what they want and what they do not want, what they will and will not accept. At this point, we are already approaching the work of making a new decision, one that arises from the client's authentic part of the self. Naturally, it is first necessary to settle accounts. It is first necessary to settle accounts with all those who demanded that the client remain in the corner and who belonged to a client's past, both individual and collective, transgenerational. This is, however, a separate part of the therapeutic work and not always a pleasant one. It is frequently accompanied by outbursts of anger and other emotions that have been suppressed for a long time, although the outcome is always positive. At the end, we have a positive outcome. How much time an individual client requires to resolve a problem for which they entered therapy is entirely individual. Each person proceeds and progresses at their own pace, while the therapist is there to accompany the client, support them in their progress, and even inspire them in their growth and development. The therapist may also become a third parent. Fifth phase, evaluation through the image. The assessment of whether the image has changed in the desired direction, that is, whether the therapeutic goal has been achieved, takes place at the end of therapy. For the purpose of evaluation, the client is usually asked to make a drawing that should correspond to the change they have experienced and visually represent that change. In the example described above, this would be a flower that is no longer on a rubbish heap but now in a more pleasant place, in a garden for example. The client chooses how they wish to express the change that has taken place afterwards. Together with the therapist if necessary, they continue to work towards the fuller realization of the established therapeutic goal. Whereas the outcome of work on the first level, psychological level, is liberation from the baggage of the past, the outcome of work on the second level, spiritual level, is the development of full wakeful awareness and compassion. Only when after working on the psychological level we move to higher spiritual level, can we truly become human, conscious and compassionate human beings. For the time being, however, this remains only possibility for our further development, perhaps in the future, as Robert Kegan, professor at Harvard, maintains. I shall not describe here the technique of full focused awareness, meditation, mindfulness, which I mentioned at the beginning as a technique that we occasionally use in our work. The interested reader may find more detailed information about it in my book, The Soul Thinks in Images, Integrative Art Psychotherapy, 2017. I believe that the first level of work, deconditioning ourselves from the past and from everything that the past carries within it and conceals in the shadow, is, at least for the present, of greater priority in our therapeutic work. The conditions for our future spiritual development and for work on the spiritual level will gradually emerge. I shall cite a short ancient Buddhist text that is sufficiently eloquent to indicate what our priorities are and why they are such in psychotherapeutic work on the first level, psychological or psychic level, rather than as yet on the spiritual level, which is a value-based level and represents a crucial and decisive transformation of values. An ancient Buddhist text, Dhammapada, anticipated Freud and teaching by thousands of years. It states, "What you are now is the result of what you were. What you will be in the future will be a result of what you are now. The correspondences of your corrupted mind will follow you like the cart that follows the ox that pulls it. The consequences of purified mind will follow you like your own shadow. No one can do more for you than your purified mind. Neither a parent, nor a relative, nor a friend, no one. A well-disciplined mind brings happiness." Meditation has precisely this purpose, to purify the mind. In fact, meditation liberates consciousness, dizziness, and awareness is the greatest virtue, while unconscious is the only sin. I would also like to mention once again the ancient Greek philosopher who said that if we do not progress in awareness, we shall sink into unconsciousness. I believe that this is precisely what is happening to us, and that Each of us is called upon personally to give our response. For this, we need to possess responsibility, that is, ability to respond, not to react. Instead of being completely defined by what happened, we may begin to experience ourselves as people who can respond. I mentioned responsibility, ability to give response, not be reactive. Response is where freedom begins. It's very important to realize. Not freedom from every limitation, but the freedom to choose a gesture, word, color, rhythm, boundary, or direction, one small movement to the life. So perhaps the most important question is not whether creativity can heal us completely, but whether it can help us remain in relationship with ourselves while we heal. Can it help us stay present when experience is difficult? Can it help us communicate when words are not enough? Can it help us imagine a future when it's not simply a repetition of the past? Can it remind us that even in pain, something with us may still move, respond, and create? Perhaps the answer is yes. Not because art removes the human condition, but because it gives us a way to meet it with attention, imagination, relationship, courage, and possibility of transformation. Creating can change us, sometimes quietly and gradually, sometimes in ways we recognize only later. Every time we give form to something invisible, we create the possibility of seeing it differently. And every time we see something differently, a new response may become possible, a new meaning, a new connection, a new beginning. And to finish, why is art so healing in our lives? To answer this question, at least in part, I shall use the words of an artist who said the following: there are moments in our lives, just as there are moments during the course of a day, when we suddenly see beyond what is ordinary and familiar. And it is precisely these moments that bring us out greatest happiness and wisdom. These are the moments in which works of art are born. Thank you. Instead of conclusion, I can mention a synthesis, 8 capacities, the healing potential of art and creativity. I would describe 8 capacities. First, the capacity to express, to give form to what is difficult to say. The second, capacity to witness, to see experience without being completely engulfed by it. Third, the capacity to relate, to share the experience with another person in a protected therapeutic relationship. Next, the capacity to understand, to discover patterns, conflicts, needs, and meanings. Next, capacity to imagine, to allow an alternative to appear before it is fully possible in life. Next, capacity to recreate, to transform symbolic form and experience agency in that transformation. Next, the capacity to embody and act, to translate a new possibility into behavior, relationship, and daily life. And finally, the capacity to integrate, to live with greater coherence around body, emotion, thought, relationship, meaning, and action. These capacities are not exclusive to artists, they belong to human beings. Yeah, I would like to finish there I began, with the question of what happens when words are not enough. Art doesn't heal because it makes suffering beautiful. It can heal because it gives suffering a form, a place, a witness, and the possibility of transformation. An image can speak when words are not ready. It can reveal what has been hidden. It can hold contradiction without forcing an immediate solution. It can make an old pattern visible, and perhaps most importantly, it can allow a person to imagine and experience that another form is possible. This is the deepest connection between psychotherapy and creativity. Psychotherapy is not only an examination on what has already happened. At its best, it is also participation in what may still become possible. From the perspective of integrative art psychotherapy, the therapeutic movement is therefore from unconscious image to conscious image, from inherited scenario to choice, from repetition to creation, and from being only a product of past conditions for toward becoming an active participant in one's own life. Its well-being means more than the temporary absence of symptoms if it includes vitality, self-knowledge, resilience, connections, meaning, and the capacity to participate creatively in one's own existence, then art is not peripheral to well-being. It is one of the oldest human ways of making experience visible, bearable, shareable, and transformable. And perhaps this is a central therapeutic gift of creativity. It reminds us that even when we cannot change everything that has happened to us, we can still discover a new relationship to what has happened, a new image of ourselves, and a new way of moving forward. Thank you.